Conrad Szymanski. You probably need no introduction.
Of course, I go way back with the business. I'm a family member. Started to talk to me about, well, you know, there could be an opportunity for you in this business. Started the dollar limit. That lasted for a while, and then it had to become the $5 limits. More than anything, Egbert was about building talent in the business. As it switched to Bob wanted to mix in talent from outside, from other retailers. You know, in the new culture that Bob was trying to install, you had to be fairly progressive and expansive in your thinking. And when we changed the names from Just Labels to Bealls Outlet, the sales immediately soared in these stores. The people have been a big part of my life. You know, you don't realize that till you step away from the day-to-day business and you realize what a great group of people we work with here.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to have you here, Conrad.
It's good to be here.
Excited to chat with you today. Conrad Szymanski, you probably need no introduction, but I'm going to ask you anyway if you can just introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Well, of course, I go way back with the business. I'm a family member. My mother's maiden name was Beall, and kind of grew up with the store. We visited here all the time when I was going to school. Florida was obviously a wonderful place to vacation when you're from Kentucky, especially during the winter. And got to see the store grow. And as I was in high school, my uncle, Egbert, your grandfather, started to talk to me about, well, you know, there could be an opportunity for you in this business. And I said, oh, okay, I'd like to know more. And he said, well, we have a set of rules, and that's our nepotism rules. And number one, you have to have a master's degree. Number two, you have to work for 3 years in the retail industry to show that you have sincere and sustainable interest in the business. And then we'd love to have you if you want to do all that. And of course, your master's degree needs to be in some area relevant to the business. And you know, I logged that in the back of my mind as I went to school. I was initially pursuing a pre-med track, and when I took anatomy, I realized memorization of Latin names wasn't my thing. And thought about, you know, what could I do in this juncture, and found a really unique program at the University of Kentucky that was a self-contained. You could fulfill all your 21 hours of prerequisites for the MBA program by taking this summer-long course. And it was a wonderful opportunity. I took that. Loved all the business courses once I got into them. You know, they were just really logical, easy for me to do well with. And so got my MBA at the University of Kentucky, got married at the same, around the same time. And Ruth Ann was pursuing a degree in education, and decided that really wasn't for her, and really wanted to go back and do a nursing degree, which caused her to go to 3 more years of school. So that committed me to Lexington, Kentucky for another 3 years. And so when I graduated from the MBA program, I started the next Monday with an offer that I got from a local department store. It was called McAlpin's, was part of the mercantile chain. And it was a great training ground because it wasn't the number one department store in Lexington. Shillito's, which was part of the Federated chain, was the number one department store, and we were the store that was kind of trying to take over the market, and doing that by being more connected to the market, because Shillito's was merchandised out of Cincinnati, we were merchandised out of Lexington. And we were more aggressive in price, and so and in inventory. So that's the training that I got, and I think it was very valuable training at that time. And as I completed my 3 years, your father, Bob, called and said, well, we really need you. We want to put in a basic purchasing system. They'd set up a set of basic books that was copied from one of the people that had come from J.C. Penney's, where they took counts monthly of all their basic items and then replenished it. What we found as we started down this road of developing a basic replenishment system was that you had to have the core merchandising system in place in order to accurately capture the point of sale transactions. It wasn't going to work if you just tried to put basic items on an inventory system. You had to try to capture everything on the system, and you had to kind of force the point of sale transactions to capture everything. And so we built on what was the System 34 at the time, with some incredibly resourceful people that I had the opportunity to work with, particularly George Hiskus comes to mind. That we built a merchandise information system that mirrored the best in the industry available at that time. Now, we had some severe limitations because it was the IBM System 34. I think my phone today has more computing power than the System 34 had. But we had to take shortcuts, so everything had to be as brief as possible. So the merchandise description could only be 15 characters because that was really, we would run into storage limits with the System 34. And of course, we always had calculation limits with that. So we couldn't do the things that mainframe computers were doing at that time, such as iterative processes. But that whole process was a success. And, when we started to inform the buyers, what they were selling, how much they had left of it, what each store had in inventory, that was really, really productive when they were armed with all that information. Ironically, we did not fully automate the replenishment process at that time, but we did provide that merchandise information system. But the buyers then had the ability they could see this basic item selling down, and they could bring more into the distribution center and then allocate it to stores as needed. And so that kind of fulfilled the role of a basic replenishment system. That basic replenishment system got done a few years later.
Mm-hmm. So that was that's an awesome introduction. Thank you, and a great kind of like the start to your career, I guess. And I want to get into more of the middle and then the latter part of your career as well. But just so everybody's aware, and I think Ryan, maybe you can show a family tree potentially, but we, our founder of the company was RM the first, and so he had a son and a daughter, and the son was my grandfather, ER, and the daughter was your mom.
That's right.
Yeah, and so you and my dad are cousins, and
he's my uncle.
Uncle.
Oh, your dad. Yeah, we're cousins.
My dad. Yeah. ER's your uncle. Yep. And so you mentioned that 3 years at a competitor was the rule back then from ER, and then also an MBA. That was the rule when basically the rule when I came on board too. It wasn't so strict on the 3-year thing, but the MBA and working for a competitor for a few years was the rule for me. So that it's funny that carried down into the generation 4. But so my dad then, when you joined the company, was already at Bealls.
He had been here for 9 years.
9 years, okay.
Okay. And had, progressed through a variety of positions, particularly in store management, and had just been promoted to vice president.
Okay.
And Egbert was still president.
Okay. It's quick. It took me a lot longer than 9 years, man.
Yeah. And, that same year, RM Senior had a stroke in February of that year, and I joined the company in June of that year.
Okay.
And he was 86 at the time of his stroke, and he had literally worked every day pretty much up until the time of his stroke, and
wow.
that really kind of precipitated his retirement from the business. But he would go to work every morning at 8:30 at the downtown store, and work till 5 and come home, and that was his life.
And that was the what location number was that?
Number one.
Number one. Okay.
At that time.
So
we ended up reusing that store number for South Venice, but that was store number one.
Number one. Okay. And so the original store that when he came down from Georgia in 1915 and started the original store location, that was in a different location though, right?
Actually, I think there was briefly a store in Palmetto, and then he moved it over to what was then Main Street. I think it's now 12th Avenue or 12th Street, or I'm sorry. And so he had a small store there, and that was the dollar limit.
In Bradenton.
And the reason the stores were all located on that street is the docks were at the end of that street where Pier 22 is today. And, the merchandise came in by boat. And so you wanted a store that was close to the docks so you could easily get your merchandise. And it, started the dollar limit. That lasted for a while, and then it had to become the $5 limit so they could sell dresses and other things of that nature, jackets.
Inflation and everything, I'm sure, contributed, right? Did it switch to the $5 limit around the time of the Great Depression?
I'm a little vague on when exactly that happened, but and then sometime around when Egbert joined the company, which would have been 1940-ish. It became Bealls. Egbert and RM, worked together in that downtown store for a number of years until the...
they drove each other crazy?
I think so. I think that was a small store for...
two personalities.
For two personalities.
Right.
And it was in the 57-ish that Westgate opened, and so then Egbert had his own store that he could run, and that store was quite successful, away from downtown, with a fairly modern air conditioning system, which I got to know intimately when I joined the company, because the air conditioning system, like today's, didn't sit up on the roof. It was kind of inside an enclosed mezzanine, and it was a huge system. It was larger than a Class 9 diesel engine, and my office was kind of right beside the system, and the whole office vibrated all day long.
Okay. That's funny. Yeah, and it was probably one of the major expenses of the construction of the place.
It absolutely was, and it was one of the obstacles. They managed to string that system together and keep it working, but it was one of the obstacles to renovating the space. A similar system was put in the Venice store.
What are your recollections of or what's your understanding of sort of, and we start with RM first, the founder of his, you mentioned his work ethic, that he worked until he was 86, and he was a store guy essentially, right? So what's your recollection of him as an individual and as a leader throughout the course of his career? What kind of a guy was he?
Well, I don't really know the answer to that. I saw him as a grandfather, and he was a very, he was a great grandfather, loved to swim in the Gulf with him. He really sincerely enjoyed his grandkids. And I probably, because he worked all the time, knew his wife, Nana, more, and she was a very prim and proper woman. Always had had a dress on, usually wore a hat, and was very formal in all of her ways. She would never go in the Gulf. You'd never ever see her in a swimsuit or shorts or anything like that. Always in a dress. And was always going out to eat. That we did as a family activity, and she really loved it. Like when the owner of the restaurant, Pete Renard, would make over her at the. They had a place out on Anna Maria Island. That was what she tended to enjoy the most. But my work with RM was kind of limited. I know that he kept a shotgun in his office back at the back of the downtown store. That was his security system. And in the later years, we always had an assistant manager in there to kind of work with him to kind of make sure things went smoothly and properly.
Uh-huh.
That's one of the places where Jim Simpson, who worked for a long time, got kind of his start in the career, was working downtown, kind of supervising the activities downtown. So
that was loss prevention back then. It was RM with a shotgun.
That was.
Okay. That's funny.
But I got to know Egbert quite a bit. Bob maybe saw all the complexities of the business. Egbert viewed it as kind of a simpler business, and was resistant to some of the changes, but knew that they had to happen. Such as the computerization that was kind of ongoing, and Bob was bringing that forward. But Egbert kind of saw the business, this is a simple business. We've been successful doing it kind of fairly simply, but I saw some power in the elimination of work at the same time. But he always had just an incredible sense for the business. He had an incredible sense for the customer and what the customer wanted, and was able to survey, what was left of what he'd purchased at market in the stores to understand what to purchase next. That preceded having kind of any merchandise system to help do that. And more than anything, Egbert was about building talent in the business. And his way to build talent was hiring young, aggressive college graduates to kind of staff the business, like Jim Simpson, like Chris Collins, like myself. He was all about building the talent from the ground up. Martha Monahan would have fallen into that kind of era of time. And as it switched to Bob wanted to mix in talent from outside, from other retailers, and in particular brought in Alan Weinstein to be the first or second, actually, general merchandise manager. And that led to a string of outside hires of particularly at the buyer level to kind of professionalize our buyer profiles. Retail industry at that time was going through a lot of consolidation. If you look at department stores, maybe at the turn of the century, there were 100 stores that were really quote unquote department stores, usually took a family name as the name of their business. And, over time, they became obsoleted by chains that came into town. They became obsoleted by consolidations and mergers. But a lot of the ones in bigger cities, like in Tampa, Moss Brothers grew up, which was part of the Allied chain. And in Miami, Burdines grew up, which was part of the Federated chain. And we're kind of this unique kind of department store. We're here in what's a retiree town. And so it's not a major metropolitan area like Tampa or Miami. So we're growing up as a department store very differently. And the path forward that Egbert instinctively knew was to grow up in other retirement towns that looked like Bradenton. So, places like Venice and Punta Gorda and Melbourne, Dunedin, they all look like similar retirement towns. And so he instinctively put the first ones there, and it was very successful. If they weren't profitable the first year, they were, because of the growth and influx of retirees, they were profitable in the second or third year. And so it was a pretty easy and pretty simple business for him. And Bob saw it as on a much more global scale and sought to professionalize the business on many fronts. And buyers were one of the fronts that he was really looking to professionalize. And with all the consolidation, it was kind of easy to pick off well-trained buyers from a Moss Brothers, from a Robinsons, from a Burdines, from a Federated store, because they were all going through these consolidations. They would go through consolidations to regionals, and then eventually, later in the 2000s, they went into national consolidations, where, what was once Moss Brothers and Burdines are now all Macy's.
So you arrive in 1979, and what was the culture like?
It was incredibly shirt sleeves culture. We very casual, but at the same time, Bob brought with him a bit of his training in the Army, his officer training in the Army. And so he insisted upon a Saturday morning work ethic. So the office pretty much would clear out at 5 o'clock, but you needed to be there at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, and you needed to stay till noon. And that was kind of the culture that you proved that you were part of the corporate team by being part of that culture. And you had to, in the new culture that Bob was trying to install, you had to be fairly progressive and expansive in your thinking. And you had to be willing to learn and to grow. And a lot of the young people that Egbert brought into the company had an incredible capacity for growth and kind of were able to grow with the company. Some fell by the wayside, but most of them had just incredible capacity. In fact, we still have a Bealls alumni group that gets together quarterly for a little luncheon.
Okay. So casual in terms of like dress and dress code. And
we were still wearing ties to work at that, but casual in terms of the interpersonal nature of it. If you wanted to talk to Bob, you just walked down to his office and said, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And that door was always open, and unless he was in the middle of a real estate negotiation, which he was doing at that point in time.
And the way that people did it seem like a close-knit family type of environment back then, or was it a little bit more structured and corporate?
Yeah, so I'd say the dynamic was different. So we had a very strong store ops guy in Frank Sinnott, and so Frank, it oftentimes kind of was this jostling for power between stores and corporate. There was that dynamic that was going on. And that was one of the bigger dynamics that was around at that point in time. Frank had a long career at McCory's and was probably a classic hatchet man in many ways. If something difficult had to be done, if somebody had to be terminated, it was Frank who would step up to do that work. And he certainly had Egbert's ear. and that was, and he was able to make a lot of unilateral decisions that more empowered than probably the buyers were at that point in time.
Okay. And then, so as your career progressed, then eventually, I guess, was it early 90s that you took over Bealls, what was Bealls Department Stores back then, which is now Bealls Florida?
There are a few steps. So after installing the merchandise system, which we had up and running in about 3 years, and that system, just got retired, right, in 24, so fully retired in 2024. We needed to put a warehouse management system in. So I was manager of the warehouse while we did the design and installation of a warehouse management system. And so I did that for a year. And I worked directly for Frank, which was fun, and we got along great. So it was a good relationship.
Warehouse is the distribution center, of course, that all the merchandise comes into.
It was another building, around the corner from here that we were in at that point in time, and I'll bring this building into it in a minute. But so then I moved over to buy linens and domestics, and we had at that point in time, we'd hired a general merchandise manager, which I mentioned, Alan Weinstein. And we had a notions business that we did as stocking stuffers, 99-cent stocking stuffers. And Alan wanted to get rid of that business. That wasn't suitable for a department store. And so we wanted to morph that into a gift business, and the Atlanta gift market was just opening at that point in time. So I got to start the gift business and change it to more of a kind of a combination housewares and home decor kind of business, morph it into that. And of course that was easy business to do at that point in time. And then the domestics business was largely a replenishment business, which was with the warehouse management system an easy business because we could easily replenish and fill back into store needs as needed. So I did that for a few years, and we were growing successfully as a chain, and it had reached 28 stores. And all of a sudden, Bob became very concerned that we could not accurately allocate inventory by store. Buyers would have a tendency to fix a particular store as an A store, and it was always an A store, and this store was always a B store or C store or whatever. And certain stores would get way overstocked, and other stores would be understocked, and he was just generally dissatisfied with the inventory levels by store and wanted to start a planning and allocation division. And so he asked me to start that planning and allocation department. At that point in time, department stores weren't doing planning and allocation. It was all specialty stores that did planning and allocation. And so George Hiskus and I got to go back to work designing and putting in a planning and allocation system within the limitations of our IBM system, which I think had grown to be an IBM System 38 at that point in time. We'd upgraded from the 34. And we copied what was going on at Casual Corner, which was one of the leaders in planning and allocations, and had some help doing that. But the idea was we were going to open this distribution center and do central receiving for all stores. And we were going to do it on a big bang kind of approach to it. So we were doing a lot, 20 to 30% of what we received was received at that old warehouse distribution center that we had. And the rest was received at store, flowed through and was received direct at store. And so we were going to go to a big bang change and do all central receiving here and have it shipped to the store in a store-ready condition. It's
a project. So he put you in charge of this thing.
I had the planning and allocation part. So
Yeah.
I was running the part where we had planners and distributors that would allocate it by store. Frank and the distribution center manager at that time had the process of distributing it to stores.
Okay.
Well, that first fall, the distribution center got incredibly backlogged, and we had to pull all the assistants into the distribution center just to get the backlog. I think it came up when you interviewed Chris in his podcast, about he had exposure to that when they had to rescue the distribution center that fall of 1984. So it's a tremendous learning issue, and it really took us a couple years to get the kinks worked out, so that we had to understand that what happens in retail is you have a peak of receipts that it naturally occurs in kind of the October, November timeframe, and that's probably double the receipt level that you have in the lull of the year, which is the June, July kind of timeframe, and it was a huge learning curve to be able to staff up for that. There's some limitations in how much labor you could hire in this market that kind of limited what you could do there. So it got, we had to do some things on the buying side to kind of smooth the receipts a little bit. Had to get a leg up in August to be able to get all the goods through the distribution center during the peak period.
Had to start early. Yeah.
Had to start early. So it took a couple years, but we got the planning and out, we got the things working kind of well in conjunction, and turned that area over to Pam Meyer, and went on to do real estate function, which Bob was really ready to give up at this point in time. And this is also about the time that we have a Just Labels chain, and we're kind of winding that down and morphing that into Bealls Outlet. And and when we changed the names from Just Labels to Bealls Outlet, the sales immediately soared in these stores on the day the sign changed. So we got interested in what can we do to roll this new Bealls Outlet chain out. And I'm getting real estate at the time and getting to grow the Bealls chain, which is now the Bealls Florida, and Bealls Outlet at the same time. And got to do real estate for about 7 years, and write the first 80 leases for Bealls Outlet, and same time do a number of Bealls deals and continue its growth at that time. And learned a lot from Cliff Walters, a fellow board member.
And Podcastee.
And Podcastee, yeah.
Yep. So,
and then during the course of the time, we hired Paul Galizia as president of the outlet. And Bob was kind of functioning as presiding over the Bealls chain, but wanted someone to focus on the outlet to make it grow. But he was kind of fulfilling that role. As he thought more and more about that role, he wanted someone to step in and become president, and ultimately that ended up being me. And so never got formally trained for it, but jumped into the deep end of the pool as president in '95 of the Bealls chain. And that was a terrible year. We had the mid-year when I jumped in. It was, the first down year for that chain, and
that's why he stepped away.
Could have been.
Yeah. I understand the feeling at this moment as you're talking about the DC being backed up with this hurricane situation that we've had, and yeah. But anyways. Back to so he stepped out and you stepped into a difficult situation. What were the areas that you hadn't had training in? You had training in merchandising, you had training in planning and allocation.
Well, so I had training in merchandising as a buyer.
Yeah.
And I certainly understood the buying process, and I helped developed a lot of the background tools that we use for buying tools, but I never had officially been part of the merchandise management. I'd never been a DMM, never been a GMM. And all of a sudden, I'm thrust into this president's position. But I was blessed that Alan had hired a lot of talent on the buying level, and I had people that could comfortably move into management roles and assume more responsibility. I had the unfortunate circumstance of, just as I got promoted, we had a VP of advertising, Sherman Kirkpatrick, who took another job right as I was stepping in. And so I had to fulfill that advertising role at the same time. And so I had a lot of challenges on my hands. But I was blessed with great people. Gwen Bennett stepped into the advertising role. We had some real strength in the merchandising division, and so Rick Edgar was able to take over a DMM position, and consistent luck in promoting from within with all the talent level that we had at Buyers. And we were also fortunate that we had just had a fairly mass consolidation at Moss Brothers, so we'd had a number of people that had come to us from Moss Brothers fairly recently. So we were talent laden at that time, and it was just a matter of getting people on the right seats of the bus.
And so this was 1995. Okay, yeah, okay. And so economically, what was happening? Because just in the next several years, that whole department store segment, including Bealls, really, really climbed and did nicely.
Well, at that point in time, if you look at the public markets, a lot of new retailing formats were coming out. Off-price came out, category killers came out. Kohl's was a darling of Wall Street. In fact, Bob and I, when I was still in the real estate area, went up and spent a day with Jay Baker at Kohl's, and got to, we'd made contact with them and just got to hear about their success. They were hoping that Jay was hoping that we were more branded than they were at that time, that we would give them some help in acquiring some of the brands they were having difficulty hiring.
Okay.
Or acquiring, excuse me. And and so Bob got very enamored with that, enamored with their sales productivity per store, their sales per square foot, which was around $200 per square foot. So they were rocking and rolling.
And
but
where were we?
100 a quarter.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said, category killers, the toy category killers, the electronics category killers, a lot was going on. Outlet malls were coming into existence. It was a very expansive time for retail. But Kohl's was making a name for themselves, and they were doing it by dramatic sales. And it was an easy thing to do at that point in time because, there were 3 broadcast TV stations, and if you wanted to corner the market, all you had to do was buy 3 commercials, and you could corner the market. And every town had its dominant newspaper, so it was very easy to speak to the public about sales events that you were having. And there weren't streaming services. There weren't podcasts. So radio was still a dominant way that you could communicate with people. So Kohl's was a sensation, darling of Wall Street at that time. And so Bob challenged me to, get the stores to a productivity level similar to Kohl's. And so So we started upsizing our store, B, doing some things like using some destination categories to drive business to our stores, and learning what categories we could really drive business with advertising and become dominant. And it was a great runway. We developed our sales. I think we peaked in 2007, and our sales per square foot rose steadily during that period, and I think it peaked at about $170 a square foot chain wide. And we were doing it in much bigger stores and much more profitable stores, and so it was a great run. And all the team, was essentially intact. From large parts of the team were essentially intact from when we took over, or when I was promoted in that 12-year period. So we were well bonded by the end of those 12 years, and we had comp gains every year. We did drive the margin down in that period of time, but we were looking
the margin rate
down. We were looking to drive the gross margin per square foot up, and that was the cadence we were, or the goal we were working against.
Pilot high and let it fly. Right?
Oh yeah, yes.
Yep. Cool. So yeah, incredible experience, incredible success story. Took Bealls to new heights for sure, as we in the late '90s and early 2000s. And yeah, I remember the numbers just stacking, and yeah, I think the Bealls business was at least twice as big as the outlet business at that point in time, and now today we see that's really flipped on its side. And
so what was happening, the internet was coming along, media was going through this incredible broadening. There are all kinds of cable TV channels. There's all kinds of streaming services coming online. So media is getting very, very diverse, and customers are starting to grow weary of the sale scenario.
Right.
They just increasingly, if you look at the comps of the off-price chains, particularly Marmaxx and Ross, their comps just kept steadily increasing in this time frame, and they were gaining market share from. In the early days, it was kind of the more sleepy department store chains that weren't playing in the promotional sphere. But then as you get into 2007, or the Great Recession, if you will, time frame, they're starting to eat into the promotional department store chain productivity as well. And so Kohl's has been the darling. Is seeing their stock price, I think, peaked in 2003.
Mm-hmm.
And, JCPenney's going through its struggles, and all of the promotional department store chains are starting to struggle at that point in time.
Macy's, they continue to. The stock price for sure, but the market cap, the total value of the company, the stock price times the shares outstanding of those companies has just gone straight down.
Absolutely.
Down to just a couple of $1 billion per company now, whereas back in those days, they would have been 70, 80, 90, $100 million companies. And that has shifted completely towards that off-price segment.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. It's been amazing to watch.
So at this point in time, Bob is 2007 turning over the CEO reins to Steve Knopik, and just going to be chairman. And I am seeing kind of the writing on the wall that Amazon's coming on. It's going to begin to really disintermediate a lot of the internet business that we're doing. We were doing a lot at that point in time on And either you're going to play in their prime game or you're not going to be a factor. And off-price is consistently winning in retail. And so I decide that it's time for me to do something entrepreneurial. I want to do something different. Steve came to me and said, "Oh, please stay. Just help me for a couple of years as we go through this transition. And what if you've got a good team on the department store side? What if I just function as kind of overseeing the presidency of the department store with your team, and you go over to the outlet, which was losing a lot of money at that point in time?" And I said, "Okay, fine, I'll do that." So because that's, I could see the opportunity there. I would say that at 2007, going into our fiscal 2008 year, we were a low price business. We weren't really an off price business. We were buying a lot of IRs and overruns through jobbers, and not developing the true off price pipeline that Ross and TJ Maxx had developed. I'd say in the 90s, I guess, when Kohl's was the Wall Street darling, people were saying, well, off-price people, they're going to run out of merchandise. And
I remember that, yeah.
As we got into the 2000s, the vendors all started realizing the power of the off-price channel, making merchandise for the off-price channel. And they were finding, they were taking their best programs, that piqué shirt, and they were saying, "Okay, Marmax, we want your volume in on this one." And so they were writing upfront orders with Marmax on their best item, just to get their volume, and so that they could drive a lower cost, and continuing to sell that same piqué shirt at a higher price to the department store chain.
Right, which they still continue to do today.
And none of that was making sense to me.
Nope, didn't make sense to me either when I was working in merchandising for Bealls department stores. And because I'd come from the outlet, and they would charge the department stores 2-3 times as much as they would charge the off-price division. And you're right, the vendor community just decided, hey, we're just going to cut merchandise, forget about this backstock stuff, and getting rid of our backstock and our IRs, it's the not quite perfect merchandise, whatever that IR stands for. But they changed that philosophy to a philosophy of, I'm going to create goods directly for the off-price community, because these are the big guys now. They're gonna give me volume. They're gonna write me orders. And so the off-price people really challenged the margins of the vendor community. They were buying it for less than the department stores were, but the vendors didn't care. They're just like, hey, here's 100,000 units at a third or a half of the cost that I'm selling the department stores. So it's really, I don't think people really realize how much of an impact the vendor community themselves, through these decisions of continuing to charge department stores like Macy's, like Kohl's, higher prices, like even Bealls department stores, higher prices, and charging the off-pricers lower prices, the impact that had on the retail landscape in America.
It was profound. And so as I moved over to what was then called the outlet, we started developing relationships directly with the brand, going out on a limb for some made-up goods when we thought we could get it at the right price. And we started, tracking how much of our merchandise was truly brand sourced. That became important to us. And we looked to expand the number of brands that we were doing business with. The way an off-price store presents merchandise affords itself a much different strategy than department store merchandising. In department store merchandising, everything is presented by style and collection for the most part. And so in an off-price merchandising, everything's presented by size. And sizing rings and your disciplines are very, very important. And the customer can see your whole assortment just by flipping hangers in an off-price arena. So that affords you the ability with HRAC's merchandising to go much shallower and much more just-in-time merchandising, and use the capacity of flow-through that your distribution centers present to you.
Much shallower, meaning more choices.
More
you don't,
choices.
You don't have to buy as many units of the same style. You have more choice.
In the peak days of the Bealls days, I mean, we were selling. So, we had a South Fort Myers store that sold over 1,000 units in the month of March of a microfiber golf short that we had for ladies. You really had to pile it deep to sell 1,000. And so we were constantly working on, well, could we go from monthly flow through open to buy to weekly open to buy? So we're, constantly dropping goods in there during March. But that was a bit of a challenge, and a challenge that we left undone in the department store days when I transitioned over to the outlet. But it was much easier with the size merchandising to, and flow through is critical to that you just want those goods constantly arriving at the distribution center and giving it to the store that needs it the most, or has the greatest opportunity to sell it. So we started the chain. We discontinued a lot of the high margin clutter that was in kind of the outlet at that time, because we were chasing margin percent and not chasing margin dollars. And in that, really began that path that Dave Alves and Tian continued of continuing to tick that price up, because we were dealing with an average unit sale price of $5, which was just burying ourselves in terms of logistics cost. And, I think it's constantly ticked up, and today is more like $12 or so, or in that range, and makes our logistics costs much more digestible. And we've done it with a lot more high quality goods, much, getting out of the irregulars, the IRs, and into first label brand goods without that cut label.
Right. Yeah, it's been quite a transition and an evolution, but it's really, it's the same transition and evolution that's been happening really kind of since the Great Recession, if not before. When you look at off price, it's like it's more brands. We're moving Bealls to more brands, to better quality, more selection, more breadth, less depth, less overall units, faster turn. More choice, and it's that component of the business has not changed at all. It's been a continuation of that strategy over the last several years. So what? So then ultimately you joined the board of directors.
Yeah, I continued with the outlet for 5 years. And we made some solid progress there. We got so when I left the outlet was considerably bigger than Bealls, and was pleased with the progress. But I needed a little time to decompress. I'd started. I graduated from the MBA program on a Saturday. I started to work on Monday. I'd never been unemployed for, just had my week of vacation, which I was never particularly good. Weeks of vacation I was never particularly good about taking, away from work, and so I needed a little time to decompress, and so I decompressed for about a year, and then joined the board.
Okay.
I didn't want to be in a position of, I wanted to be able to ask hard questions, but not second guess or take personal any decisions then management was making. You as a board member, you want to be able to ask challenging questions, but then you don't want to have such pride of a prior course of action that it became emotional for you, and so that period of decompression helped in that process.
Yeah, what was it like? What was the transition coming onto the board like after being involved in management and operating of the business for so long?
Well, you see it, from two different sets of view. When you view the board of directors from a management point of view, and the board of directors really is to some degree in a family business, serves as a sounding board for the CEO. But for the management, for that level beneath the CEO, it's someone that you have to answer to, and they have to be comfortable, and so you feel like as management you have to go in there, owning your business, offering clear direction as to where you want to take the business, and you're a little sensitive about being second guessed. And as a director, your perspective of I'm just here to help them see the broader business picture, help them see some of the things that are going on in the business world that I'm picking up in the reading that I'm doing, and putting that on their plate for them to consider. And whether it's we need to start, the Great Recession is behind us, we need to start contributing to the 401k plan again, and we're too far behind in that. Things like that, you want to raise. And the other thing I think is that the company can only be as good as its board of director function in many ways, and so I really felt that we had to function as a high level of board of directors. And you and I have worked together recruiting new directors, and I'm excited about the cast of new directors that we've brought in. But, we really have a strong set of directors that do the pre-read, come in prepared with thoughts and questions, and really serve as a great sounding board for management.
Yeah, it's a great group of people and a great culture and very effective. And as you mentioned, it's your approach to oversight, essentially steering the board in the right direction without micromanaging or getting into too much detail. That can be a challenge for new directors coming on, but they usually pick up on things really pretty quickly, But at that first meeting or two from a new director, they can really try to get into the weeds and really kind of direct people, as opposed to oversight, and it can be a bit of a difficult transition. But I think that our board is so mature and so talented and so insightful and in many cases visionary that it has been very helpful for me personally, as for my position, to be able to learn from them and bounce ideas off of them and just feel comfortable and confident about the direction of the company based on their input. It's been a blessing to have the board for sure.
Well, we've been blessed for the past 40 years to have Cliff Walters on the board.
Right.
He's provided unusual insight, and he is very unique as an attorney. He's as anti-litigation as you could possibly be for an attorney, and he's just into providing solid business counsel to keep you out of trouble. And we as a company are kind of unique in how we've operated and stayed out of lawsuits and been able to focus on the business and rather than focusing on little skirmishes with other business parties.
Right, for sure. Yeah, Cliff the legend. Cliff was the second legacy interview that I had. I think episode number 2 that I had on this podcast, and of course he has served as director emeritus because we have this retirement age, and so Cliff approached that and has now moved off the board. Sadly, his last meeting was a couple of weeks ago, and you are now taking over that emeritus role for him. So, what are your thoughts on that? How are you feeling about shifting from a full time? I mean, it's still full time, but from a voting director to an emeritus.
I hate to give it up. I understand the reasons for it. Your business experience loses some currency over time. And I've been out of the business for 12 years. And to some ways, it feels like, oh, I'm getting marginalized. But I can see where it's right for the business, that you lose currency and you get involved in a few too many leisure activities and too much travel, and you lose some of the business knowledge that you had that could impart to the company a few years ago. So it's right, but Bealls has been a big part of my life, and it's kind of sad to be leaving it behind at this juncture. The people have been a big part of my life. You don't realize that till you step away from the day-to-day business, and you realize what a great group of people we work with here, and that they're just real people, and have added a tremendous value to the company over the years.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. Yeah, it's, but I guess in part that's why we have the emeritus role, so that we can continue to extend the directors who are still additive, as you are, as Cliff was for many years after that age. So, yeah, it's, well, good. Yeah, I mean, what do you see then as kind of the future of where is retail going? I mean, we talked a little bit about kind of the path and how it's been shifting from this department store segment to this off-price segment. And then we have the rise of online that's eating up a lot of business from people, and more people are not shopping in store. These are kind of the trends. But if you take a look out, 10 years from now, 12 years from now, what does the retail landscape kind of look like to you?
Well, I think that the convenience of Amazon Prime is obviously an incredible phenomenon, and has been. And, as we all lead busy lives, the simplicity of being able to, with a few clicks of a button, get whatever you need replenished, is continuing to be what I'd call a kind of a cancer on store-based retail. Now, the limitation of it heretofore is the cost of that last mile of delivery to the house. And so, what is surviving that is largely the low price part of the retail industry, which is the realm of off-price at this point for the most part. But if it's under $20, it's hard to deliver economically at that last mile to the house. And so that becomes kind of a limitation factor of where that can go. But logically, that space continues to grow, and we've not seen a peaking of off-price productivity. But I suspect that at some point in time, we're going to see a peak of off-price productivity. Marmaxx, Ross, Burlington are all adding units. We're adding units. We're gonna see that peak of off-price productivity. If you look at places where Ross and Marmax are going, and Burlington are going today to add new stores. They're more rural markets. They're less productive markets. They're not like the suburban markets they've been in. So, there are limitations to that. But that path ahead is a little bit sketchy to me. I haven't filled in the blanks there yet. Mm-hmm. And, we know the way the game is going to be played for a few years, but, going out beyond 5 or 6 years is pretty difficult at this point.
It is, yeah. I was hoping you could tell me the answer, because it's tough to look past about 5 for sure. Well, good. Yeah, I just maybe a couple of closing questions just to kind of wrap it up and give people maybe a full picture of you and what you're doing now, what kind of you're working on. So what does retirement look like? Like what are your hobbies? What are you into these days?
Well, first, this town, Bradenton, has just been an incredible place for Bealls. It's been an incredible place for myself and my family. I can't think of a better place to have raised kids. So I have been committed to giving back to the community. And you can't do everything. So my passion has been about third grade reading level in Manatee County. We've made steady progress, but not the dramatic progress that I'd like to see made in Manatee County. And I continue to actively work in that arena. I work closely with our superintendents and some of our Title I schools, because when you look at Manatee County, our deficit is in Title I schools, which are our poorer schools. And so the inability to read on grade level at third grade is definitely correlates highly to poverty, correlates highly to English as a second language. And these are the things that we got to conquer if we want to be a great community in the future. So that's my passion. But beyond that, I seek recreation in terms of bike riding and playing tennis and travel. They're all real enjoyable. Tennis, because I play doubles, kind of fills that social void that I miss from being in Bealls. Getting to get together with great people that I play tennis with and share their lives.
Well, let's before we close out, let's maybe just look back one more time. Is there any story or anything that really sticks out from your long-term career? Something funny, something memorable that you could share that might somehow encapsulate either an individual or encapsulate a time period or the company, or something that's of course PG-13 or below, in terms of one of your more memorable stories throughout your career.
Hard to zero in on one story. I just have tremendous appreciation for a number of the people that we worked with, and the different things that I was able to learn from the different people. As much as I saw limitations in Frank Sennett, I certainly learned a lot from him in terms of running a solid operations organization. And Weinstein, he was a fabulous merchant. He brought absolutely great business skills to our total team here. We couldn't have had the success we had in that run, that 12-year run, without the foundation that he built. Bob was so incredible in my career. He was constantly pushing, constantly looking beyond where we were, looking at a broader picture and saying, where do we need to go? And always challenging me and pushing me in that direction. And letting me find my own way of how to go about doing it, but certainly laid out the right challenges in front of me. So I'm just blessed to have worked with all those people.
Love it. Love it. Well, Conrad, it's been an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I know that over the years I've learned a lot from you. So, not only working with you early on in my career, but also through working with you on the board for the last decade or more. I guess it's been, how many years has it been?
Well, I think we joined the board about the same time, and we both had the same vision for where we wanted to go with the board, and we've worked steadily in that direction, and I think achieved a lot.
I agree. Yeah, it's been fun to work with you and to kind of change and update the board over the last couple of years. It's been great.
It's got to be your board. It's got to be a board that you respect and listen to, and give value to you in running the business.
For sure. And we've got that right now.
We do.
Yep. But yeah, man, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming in. I know it can be probably a little nerve-wracking for people coming in. I don't give you the questions beforehand. I don't. It's just kind of let's sit down and chat kind of a thing. So you did an amazing job of talking through all these topics with me today. I know it's been a while since you've got an incredible memory. It's a photographic memory, but I just really appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you did with the company to get the company to where it is today. If it wasn't for you and your leadership over the decades that you worked here, Bealls is not what it is today for anybody that's working here. So,
well, thank you.
Yeah, very much appreciative of you and your contributions to the family, to the business, and to our employees. So, great,
okay,
great to chat with you.
Okay, enjoyed it tremendously.
Good. All right. That's awesome, man. Well done.